Okay, cool. Well, next up is myself and Andrew.
You're way ahead of Justin on that slide.
Oh, yes. And we're done.
It's like the end.
Cool. All right, here we go. All right, so myself and Andrew are going to be talking about drivers in Config Manager, and more specifically, kind of some of the improvements that have come out throughout time, specifically with integration within the Config Manager console. So this originally came out in Config Manager 1806, and then there were some improvements in 1906 in the way that catalogs, and more specifically, it's most helpful for drivers around categorization and automation of it. So with that said, if you've ever used SCCM, this screen might look familiar to you. So in short, driver catalogs are pretty massive. So for example, we're looking at the Dell catalog, the HP, and Lenovo, and the total number of updates, if you were to publish them all, what that would look like. And here's an example of one of the updates within one of the driver catalogs. So you can see, now this one is one of the longer ones, but essentially what we want to cover in this option is, how you can make sure that you're only publishing what you need so that you don't do things like bloat WSUS with every single update within a driver catalog. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to cover a bit of this one, Andrew?
Yep. So I was going to go over the improvements in the third-party catalog. There's been 3 revisions of how third-party patching catalogs work within Config Manager and SCCM. We had V1. It was a single monolithic catalog. All the information was contained in a single XML. V2 improved that. It created an SDP file for each update that was in the main single XML. It also brought in certificates that allows Config Manager to actually bring in those certificates and ensure that they're trusted for each third-party update. It also improved the speed that SCCM was able to process updates. It did that by actually adding those SDP files for each update. So instead of trying to scan one massive XML file, which like the Dell catalog, I think ends up being like 50 megs of just text, each update becomes its own XML file, and that's much faster and easier for SCCM to read. V3, which really changed things on the Config Manager side, it added categories. It basically added a file called update categories. It's a JSON file that lists every single category in a catalog, and then there's a separate JSON file for each category that lists the updates that belong in each category.
Yeah, so kind of if we're looking back from the evolution, the first thing that kind of came out was SCCM, so System Center Update Publisher, and primarily that would have been used really, I would say, a lot by authors, so people that are building catalogs like Dell, HP, Lenovo. That's where they would build in their logic. And prior to the integration within Config Manager, where you could natively add some of these drivers, you actually, as a user, if you wanted to use driver catalogs, would have also been using SCCM as well. And that would allow you to publish third-party updates to WSUS, and then it would sync into Config Manager, just like a Microsoft update. You would see them there. But the bad with this was the process was 100% manual. So just to kind of show you what that looks like, let me just jump over to one of our labs. So if you've ever used this before, basically anytime a catalog got updated, you would have to go in and import the latest catalog. So let's say that you wanted to go get the latest drivers, you would have to go through, import the catalog into SCCM, which since this one's about 6,000 updates, the extraction and import alone will probably be about 15 minutes. And then you would have to kind of go manually choose which of those new updates that you've imported you want to publish. So that process was quite manual and not really a great experience from a automation or user perspective. Okay, do you want to cover a bit of the V2 stuff, Andrew?
Yep, I'll take care of this. So the V2 catalog came with an update to System Center Update Publisher, or SCCM, that was released in 2017. And along with that, Config Manager 1806 was actually able to import third-party update catalogs as well. This is where they added the certificates, which was really what we did to deploy third-party patches. Those certificates need to be trusted by Config Manager in order for the updates to install. So this brought in Config Manager publishing, which really lets you do everything on the Config Manager side. However, you were still required to bring in the entire catalog of updates. So if you have a catalog of 5,000 updates, every single one of those updates is going to be brought into WSUS, the entire process couldn't be automated. And now the bad thing about bringing all of those updates into WSUS is every one of your clients will scan against every update brought into WSUS. So if you bring in those 5,000 updates, no matter whether or not it's a Dell or an HP, it's going to scan against every single update you have in WSUS. And that means that for every update that looks like this, it's going to run all of those queries on every device. So that can add a lot of time to your subscans, and it can add a lot of time on your client side when they scan against WSUS.
Cool. Yeah, and then as far as the V3 catalog goes, so Config Manager 1806, you got this cool new option in your console, basically to add in catalogs. But the big downside there is you didn't have control over which updates within that catalog you wanted. And that's where you could get some of these scan issues where you bring in a ton of updates and, just everything went in, you didn't have any selection. So then about a year later, Config Manager 1910, they did come out with a new V3 catalog that allowed vendors like Dell, HP, Lenovo to start categorizing all their updates into specific categories. So this will look very similar to the way that you have products within your software update point. So for example, for Dell, and we'll go through this in a demo, you'll see things like latitude models where you could be very selective and not publish everything.
Yeah. So one of the things I see a lot is people, all the big players, Dell, Lenovo, HP, they all have a V3 catalog available now. But I see a lot of people that have to move from a V2 where everything's been brought in, or every single update's in their WSUS, and they're moving to a V3. So even if you move to that V3 catalog and resubscribe and make your changes, the updates are still going to be stuck in your WSUS. So when you move from V2 to V3, you need to do a few things. So you need to resubscribe to the catalog and choose the categories that you want to bring in. And I really recommend here to choose as few categories as possible. Choose like 1 to 5, because every category you choose is going to bring in another 100 or so updates at least. After you do that, you need to decline any updates that don't belong in any of the categories that you selected. And I have a script later that I'll show that actually will help you do this automatically. And then you need to run a WSUS cleanup, and that WSUS cleanup will really help clean out the content and those old updates from your WSUS and keep things running smoothly. You should be running WSUS cleanup anyway, either as part of like a script. Brian Dam has a great script for that, and it's also built in the Config Manager now within your sub settings. But WSUS cleanup should definitely be being run just to make sure that things stay clean. And then for these driver catalogs, there are some vendor specifics here. Dell actually requires an agent to be installed on the device. That's the Open Manage Inventory agent. And it does that and that agent creates WMI classes that are used in the applicability rules. And actually that first rule we showed was a Dell update. And so you could see that it had the custom Dell WMI class in there. They added V3 catalog support in March of 2020. Lenovo and HP do not require a client. They use the built-in Windows WMI classes to actually build their applicability rules. Lenovo added V3 catalog support in June 2020, and HP added that recently in August of 2020.
Cool, and I'll take this part. So one of the big things that we see just around third-party updates in general, because we obviously cover that pretty heavily as a product, is a lot of people can get confused by metadata updates. So things like these blue icons. So one thing to note is any version of Config Manager prior to 1910, when they added V3 support, which we'll cover, whenever you subscribe to a catalog, by default, it would publish all updates in that catalog, but more specifically, it would publish it with metadata only. So there is if you check out the PowerPoint and you want to go deeper into this, we do have a KB article that kind of covers in detail what this means. But from a Config Manager perspective, if the updates aren't published with full content, it basically means that Config Manager never went to Dell to download the actual driver update, and you can only get scan data from clients. Okay, and we'll show you what that looks like in a demo. Okay, so I think almost the rest will be fully demo. So let me jump over to our lab. Okay, so if you're kind of first starting in with drivers and you just want to get them configured, the first step is going to be to actually enable the third-party update feature. So what should happen when you go over to your SUP, and you have to be on 1806 or newer, and ideally you would probably want to be on 1910 or newer to get the new categories feature. So you should see this option. Now, if you don't see it and you're on that build, you're going to want to go over to features and just check whether or not enable third-party updates is enabled. So it should be enabled automatically, but we have seen a couple customers where, for whatever reason, even when they upgraded Config Manager, it didn't auto update and turn this on. Okay. So first step, we'll go through, we'll say we want to enable third-party updates. And this is kind of a point that some people can get confused by. So the option for Config Manager to manage the cert, basically what that means is if you don't have a WSUS signing cert, which is required for any third-party updates, that's how your clients can validate it's coming from a trusted cert. One confusion is that, if you don't have HTTPS enabled in your SUP, you can't use this feature at all. HTTPS is only required in the event that your software update point is remote and you have this option enabled. So in our environment, for example, so we have our software update point, right? And it's running directly on our site server. So regardless of whether our SUP was remote or not, this would always work. But let's say that you have like a remote SUP. So let's say you had SUP02, and this was on its own server. This is somewhere totally different than the site server. If you wanted SCCM to auto manage the cert, which means it could automatically create one if it doesn't exist, and it could also read it and deploy it to clients, that's the scenario where if it's remote, you would need it to be in HTTPS in order for that to work. So jumping back over here, first thing we'll do is trigger a software update point sync. So what's going to happen now that we enable that option? We're going to see during that sync, if it detects that you don't currently have a WSUS signing cert that's going to be used to sign the updates created, Config Manager is going to automatically manage that for you. So it's going to say, hey, we couldn't find a cert. Let's go ahead and generate one. So if we were to come back into this now, under administration, configure site components and software update point, we can see that it's now auto created one and it's populated here. So super easy option. Now, if you're in the scenario where your WSUS server is remote and you don't have WSUS configured for SSL, you could manually generate the cert on that remote software update point using something like System Center Update Publisher, and then you could enable this option, just choose to manually manage it. Now, by having it automatic, what's also pretty cool is over in your client settings, if you have third-party updates enabled, it's going to automatically deploy that cert to client. So any drivers that you deploy to that client, it's going to auto trust the cert. And then kind of the last thing that you're going to notice is back over third-party update catalogs. you can see that now that we've enabled it, they're showing up here. So to get a little more detail about what actually happened, let me just jump back over. Bear with me a second. Oh, here we go. Okay, so finally we're back on. So when you went and enabled that third-party update option, basically what happened in the back end, config manager went in and it said, okay, I see that this is now enabled. And in order to actually show like which catalogs are available, you can actually see that component go out and download a file. So if I come in and launch that, we can see that it's just a cap, and basically what it contains is a list of all the catalogs that Microsoft has partnered with, like Dell, Lenovo, HP are the current ones, for example. And within that download, you can actually see specifically how it configures it. So where it downloads the catalog, you know, what's the name, what's the vendor, and this is how that all gets added when you actually go check that box. Okay, do you want to share out, Andrew? I think you're next.
All right, everyone should see my screen now. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and enable, I'm going to show how to enable the Dell third-party catalog now. I believe I have all the steps pre-done here, so all I have to do is go in and enable the catalog. So this would all be done after you go ahead and configure your certificates and configure your software update point accordingly, just as Justin did. And I've got third-party software updates. Actually, I didn't enable it, so I'm going to go through that process again real quick. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and enable the catalog after it shows up. Should show up after a refresh or two. Apologies, I should have had this one set up and ready to go. While we wait, I'll actually jump over to my other demo client and show what your software update point is going to look like after this is done. So we'll go here and software updates. And if I go into all software updates, you'll see that we have a ton of Dell drivers enabled. I will tell you that we brought in about what, 10, 15 categories yesterday, Justin, and, yeah, and they were still syncing this morning.
Yeah, and it was specifically limited to, I think, the Latitude 6X model and 7X model.
Yeah, the E6000 and E7000 series of Latitude. So this is how many updates it brought in. We don't have any Windows updates on here, so bringing in those 10 categories brought in over 1,000 updates. So that's why I really want to stress the importance of choosing only exactly the models you need. Bring in only the models you need, because if not, you're going to have a very bloated WSUS. Like I said, 2 or 3. Hopefully this one should be done now. Yes, so there's our update catalogs. Someone asked about the HP ones, and they were wondering if the HP catalog was V3 yet, and I'm pretty sure it is. And they asked how generic the HP catalog was. So I'm gonna do the HP catalog and double check that they've actually categorized their catalog properly. So you're gonna go in here, you subscribe to the catalog. You have to view the certificate. You do not need to actually pull in the certificate. You don't need to install it on your device. All you have to do is view it. So all you have to do is open this window and close it, and then you're able to continue. A lot of people think they need to install their certificate on their device. You don't need to do that. You just have to view it. And then we'll click next.
Yeah, just to be clear about the cert. So this is a piece that's actually pretty important, probably mainly from a Microsoft perspective. So when you actually go and click accept this cert, what you're basically saying is any binary or any update that has a binary from this vendor, they can basically tell which certs I should trust. So within a catalog, a vendor like us or Dell, HP, Lenovo, they have to include all the content certificates for any update. So for example, for HP, when you actually go download their driver file, it's going to be digitally signed. And that vendor can include multiple certs because a lot of those files could be signed differently. So when you accept that, that's how Config Manager knows, hey, this user said, I trust this catalog. Since it's not like a Microsoft source, they want to make sure that when you go subscribe, you have to click accept to make sure that you trust that vendor is basically why that piece is pretty important from that acceptance.
And you know what, I'm gonna actually show that. We've got time. So I'm gonna actually open up this catalog. And I want to extract this whole catalog.
Yeah, we don't have 7-zip, do we?
No. Where's my extract all? Darn it, Windows. Well, actually here, we don't need to see it in the folder structure. But you can see here, there's the SCP files that I'm talking about, JSON files. But if we scroll down, here's the certificates. So it's going to pull in all of these certificates that are in this cab file as trusted. And it's going to trust those certificates by default. So that's sort of what we're talking about there about the trusting of the signing cert. Trusting this cert trusts all those certificates that are included in the catalog. All right, and let's see how HP has categorized their updates. So this is what you get when the publisher has a V3 catalog. You're able to actually choose certain categories for synchronization. So it looks like Dell has it split up by, looks like it's by their like model line, Elite and Pro tablets, and it looks like they have broken it up pretty well now per model. So we can go in and see the models that we have. So let's say we have, I don't know anything about HP model lines. I've always done Dell, so I don't know which one of these is the newest, but I'm going to go ahead and do, oh man, what's a cool one? The Z line. I know the Z line's cool. And we'll do a few of these. I'm going to choose.
Was HP the one that had a backpack model?
Yeah, they had the VR backpack, but I'm not sure if that's got a driver cab for it. I'm just going to select these three for now. That's fine. So what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, we want to synchronize those updates. Oh, here we go. Someone said the 840 G5 EliteBook. That seems like a cool one. So let's find that. 840 G5 notebook. Or is EliteBook a different thing? We'll do the 840 G5. That's great. Cool. And so what we're doing here when we check these is we're saying we want to bring these updates. We want to bring the metadata only for these updates into Config Manager. I'm going to hit next. Oh, I saw the view. Yes. There's our backpack. All right. There we go. That's enough.
Nice.
And then Config Manager, what was this? 2002 added this feature, Justin, or was it 2006?
I think it's actually 1910 as well. I think V3 added both.
It didn't add the staging. So this staging content was added later. A later release of Config Manager added the staging content. This allows you to actually, instead of the update being metadata only, it'll bring in the full content for that update. So if you know by default you want to bring in all the update content for that update, and you intend on deploying these drivers out, you can have Config Manager actually bring in the content as well on the sync, and you can do that by selecting the categories that you want to sync in. This, again, like we said last night with the Dell, we brought in 10 categories and it took literally all night to sync. And I think it was still syncing this morning. So just be aware that depending on the number of drivers you're about to bring in, it's going to take some time for your WSUS sync to run and download all this content.
Yeah, and one initial thing that you could do as well, like let's say that you just want to see the scan data. So how many machines actually need updates first? You do have the ability where, you could maybe select a larger set on that first screen if you go back, Andrew. Yeah. And that's going to be the metadata only. So maybe you want to sync like maybe a larger amount of categories just to see like, hey, how many machines actually need it? And then you can always come back into the properties and then either auto stage it, or you can always right click the update in the console and choose to publish now. And then at that point, that's where it's actually going to go get the update binary from Dell and then publish it. So a couple options there. But like Andrew said, like if you know you have this model, certainly doesn't hurt adding it here, but you may want to be selective because this can be a lot of content depending on what you choose.
Definitely. Yeah, and just always keep in mind that everything you select is going to just be more content, is going to be more scans on your WSUS side. Just always keep that in mind when you're selecting things, and one of these categories could contain 100 drivers. So it's definitely something to weigh against the amount of time that it's going to take to scan and how slow WSUS will be based on how many models you want to support. I'm just going to do this one model for now and click next. I honestly don't think I'm going to sit and wait. You can also schedule the synchronization for this catalog to occur. And so this is how you fully automate the process of bringing in the new drivers. So if you want, you can have the sync every 30 days. And what that'll do is make sure that those new updates get brought in every 30 days. And it's gonna start going now. I'm gonna go to the logs actually. And look at the SMS. A lot of this data is again gonna be in that SMS ISV log. And we'll see that it's actually starting to bring things in. And so here you see it actually started the download for the catalog. Starts its processing. Here's that certificate where it checks the signature. That certificate is actually going to show up in Config Manager as well. I'm going to go into here and go to certificates. And here's our HP certificates that are now trusted because we trusted that top level certificate.
If you increase the type column, like maybe make it full screen, Andrew, I think it does differentiate as well between the main catalog one and then the content cert. Yeah. So any of the ones that vendor included would be considered the content certs. So by trusting it initially, any additional certs that vendor says, hey, there are update files signed by these other certs, that's where you can see the differentiator between the content versus the main one that's signing the catalog.
Absolutely. All right. I'm hoping we will start to see this catalog, or yeah, okay, here we go, it's churning. So here you go, you can see it actually processing all of these updates. And you'll see here that it's actually looking at each one and saying, oh, it's not in a category configured for syncing, or it is. And so it's going to process all these updates. It's a very noisy log. But you can see here it's going through and it's processing every update. I think there were 11,000 updates in there that it's going to go through and determine whether or not it should be syncing that update. All right, next up, I'm going to show once all these updates end up in your environment. Well, actually, so say you were on a V2 catalog already. I see a lot of people on the V2 catalog and they're moving to V3, but they've still got all those old updates around. So I'm going to show, I created a script to actually help clean up those updates that aren't in a category that you've selected before. That's on my other environment real quick. I think Justin kicked me off my lab.
My bad. Yeah, I think I did.
So we'll log in there. All right, cool. Like we said yesterday, or like I said earlier, we went in and yesterday configured the Dell driver catalog on this device in this lab, and we chose the Dell E60, the Dell E6000 and Dell E7000 series models, and we told it to stage those, and it took literally all night to sync. So now we have a bunch of these drivers in here. Now, say you just watched this this user group and you're like, well, man, I had all of them selected, or I went from V2 to V3, but I've still got all those driver catalogs in there. Or you want to reduce the number of drivers that you have synced in WSUS. I created a script and it's on our VSMUG website to help clean up those updates. So I'm going to just go ahead and run the script, and the script will scan your WSUS. It'll bring back the catalogs that you have synced, and so you'll choose the catalog that you want to clean up. It's gonna actually it downloads the Dell cab, extracts it. It figures out all the categories that are in that catalog, and then presents to you a list. And that list will ask you which categories you want to keep. So what I'm going to do is say I just want to keep the well, actually, so it actually will scan and it'll say, hey, I see that you've selected certain categories within Config Manager. Do you want to just keep those categories and get rid of all the other categories that you haven't selected in Config Manager? Or you can manually do it and say, hey, I want to keep these specific categories from now on. So I'm going to choose no just because I want to be able to show the picking of the categories. So I'll say no here, and it's going to actually give me a list of categories. So these are all the categories available in the Dell catalog. It also these are the parent categories, and then all of these categories below are members of these parent categories. So if I wanted to just keep the latitudes, I could click this and it would keep all the latitude drivers. But I want to get rid of the Dell E6000 series and just keep the Dell E7000 series. And actually, Justin showed this yesterday. You can actually add criteria and search. So I'm going to do E7000 or E7.
Yeah, and if you did come from a V2 catalog, or if you came from a config manager version like prior to 2002, or 2002 or 1910, I forget which one added the categories view. It's essentially like if you had everything selected, because in those previous versions there was no criteria at all. So if you did have that enabled, you essentially have every single driver update, whether it's Dell is 6000, HP like 11 or 12. Yeah. They're essentially all published in your current state, most likely.
Absolutely. And if so, say you want to move from that you're basically still in the V2 catalog until you resubscribe within the console. So if you were on a V2 catalog, so what March of this year was the earliest. So if you subscribe to a catalog before March of this year, you likely have the full catalog imported into your WSUS. So what you need to do in that situation is go back in here, right click and resubscribe. Hit subscribe to catalog and go through the whole process one more time, and make sure you go through and only select the updates or the categories that you need. That'll ensure that any new updates that get brought in through the catalog are only in those new categories, but it won't get rid of the old ones. So that's what this script is for. The script is to get rid of those updates that aren't in a category that you choose. So say you just did that and you ran my script, you can actually just click yes, and it would only choose the ones you have selected in Config Manager. Or you can do manually and say, hey, I want to clean out all the ones that aren't in these specific categories. So I'm going to clean out all of the updates that aren't in these categories here. So that should hopefully it should have the number of updates that I have in Config Manager. I believe I have 1,000 in there now. I think it was like 1,110. $1,116. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this and click OK. It's going to actually go through, and it has one more step before it does anything. Oh, it didn't work. Well, that's not great. Oh, you have to run it as admin. Someone hit cancel. It's gonna. User error here. All right, when I run it as admin, it needs admin permissions to actually scan against WSUS. So we'll go through this process one more time. Let me go through the questions while we wait. Someone said, should we unsubscribe first before, and then subscribe? No, you don't need to unsubscribe first. You can just click subscribe again. Let me see. Here we go. All right. And then I just want to make sure that I have this question super clear. This pop-up that comes up, it's basically saying if you click yes here, it'll look within Config Manager and see what categories you have selected, and it'll clean out any updates that aren't in a category that you have selected in Config Manager. If you click no, it's going to let you choose which categories to keep. I'm going to click no just because I really like to show how this works, and we can do display name and E7, and we're going to say, hey, keep all these again, and click OK. And now it should actually come back and give me a count of updates. This will take a little time because it has to scan WSUS. Let's see if I can go through questions. Someone asked for the WSUS maintenance script. I assume that's
I just posted the
script?
link in GitHub.
Okay, yeah, it's on GitHub. Feel free to let me know any improvements. I know the Lenovo drivers are classified a little differently, and they're a little harder to actually list the categories because they list each subcategory as drivers, apps, and firmware. So they're gonna show up a little different in the list than the HP and Dell ones, which are based on the model name.
Yeah, and also one there about Adobe Reader catalog. So I'll be demoing that next, basically how the V1 catalog for Adobe and some of the gotchas there.
And again, the catalog is huge. So what it's doing is it actually exported the catalog and it's importing the entire catalog and grabbing all the updates. So yeah, this is going to clean up a little bit more than half. It's going to clean up 719 updates in WSUS. So I'll go ahead and click yes, or actually I'm going to click no and actually show the updates before declining. So these are all the updates that are going to be declined from the catalog. And I'm going to click OK, and it will go ahead and decline them. So it's going to go through and decline 719 updates in WSUS.
Yeah, and that's pretty key because that's going to reduce clients every time they do a software update scan cycle. They're no longer going to have to evaluate against those updates that you essentially don't care about, but they just got published when you initially did your enabling the drivers, because it not super clear unless you looked at the docs that, hey, if you go click subscribe prior to V3, like you got every single thing that there was.
Yes, and so that decline might take some time, so I might hand it over to Justin. And we can come back. Let me just look at WSync Manager real quick and see how that's looking. Okay, yeah, it's syncing updates. So
cool.
Go ahead and take over, Justin, and then I'll share at the end, and hopefully we'll see a bunch of X's.
Alrighty. Let me share. Okay, that come through okay?
Looks great.
All right. So there was a question about the Adobe catalog. So just want to cover some of the gotchas with that. So let's just go over here. And so first thing I'm going to do is kind of grab the Dell catalog. Oh, no, read only.
You can scroll down at the bottom part and copy that.
Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at that. And then lastly, so for Adobe, they are not going to auto appear like Dell, HP, and Lenovo. And we saw that file that got downloaded from Microsoft. And that's basically a list of vendors that Microsoft knows are compatible, right? And basically what that means is they are using at least the V2 catalog that includes the certificates. Now for Adobe, you can actually go get their driver catalog. Just paste it in the link here as well as an announcement in Teams. So let's say that you want to do Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat. You can actually go. You can download the cab from their website and basically copy the URL, right? So let me just download that. And what you can do, you can actually add this catalog in manually, right? So if you come in here, you would simply paste the URL that you got from their download, and you can actually go create a custom one. Now, the only thing to look out for in this scenario is, so let's go ahead and extract the Adobe catalog, and then let's extract the Dell catalog. So if we open up that Adobe one, so basically what V1 means is it's just the catalog. So for example, it's only the updates and the detection for those updates. So that will allow us to publish them into Config Manager, but there's not going to be any trust that you can have automatically happen like Dell or any other V3 catalog. So for example, in the V2 folder, these are actually the certificate files. Certificates. So these are actually the certs that vendor included. So you can actually come in and subscribe to the catalog. So let me just go through and let's do one of the older ones that contain more updates. So let's say that you had Adobe Reader Classic 2015. You have the ability to come in here and click Add Catalog. You can call Adobe. Oh, backwards. Okay. And we'll do next here, and then next here. And then okay. And let's go ahead and subscribe. So what you're going to notice differently for Adobe, now you can certainly still do it, but since they don't have the V3 or the V2 catalog, the only option you're going to get here is basically the sync schedule. So how often do you want to go check if that catalog has been updated? And that's pretty much all you're going to get. So the reason for that is because since that vendor doesn't have the newer format, there's no way for Config Manager to know how to display that or which certificates to trust. So what we're going to actually see here when we go out to ISV sync agent log, we're going to see that it can still read that cert, right? So I mean, we can see it went out, downloaded the cab file, and if you actually look at the ISV sync log, you'll actually be able to see, hey, they detected that this catalog does not have V2 certs or V3 classifications, and it's a V1 catalog. So you can even see that right in their logs. And basically what that means is, let's come back in here. Let's run a quick sync. There we go. So just see if that's still publishing. Okay, so within that older 2015 catalog, we can see we had 46 updates. So if we come back in, now that we ran a wsync, we can start to see that those updates are now coming in for that older catalog. So everything will work. There won't be any automated classification, so you can't get specific. And that's probably less of a big deal for Adobe because they're overall, they're pretty small catalogs, right? But what you're not going to get is any automation around the automatic content download. So you can see that these updates are showing up as blue, which means they're metadata. So if I went through and tried to download it, that's where you would get that error that we mentioned in that KB article. But let's go through and let's go by release date. And I'm just going to go publish one of these older ones. So let's say that you decided, hey, you see that clients need it once you gave them time to scan, and you wanted to publish the content so you could actually deploy it. So when you come through and click Publish Third-Party Update Content, what you're going to see here in a second, you're going to see that same SMS ISV sync agent log. You're going to see it go out and actually download the file from Dell or from Adobe. But the issue is when we go through and we look at the certificates that we actually got. So here's the Adobe cert, and we can see the only certificate that it was able to bring in was the main one they used to sign their catalog. And that's because they don't have that V2 format. So what's actually going to happen when you go publish this, and this is something that you would want to be aware of, once that kicks in, and sometimes it can take a minute or two for this sync, even after you right click and choose publish, it can take a second for that to kick in and actually go out and start downloading the content from Adobe. There we go. So we can see it's now starting to download that update. And this is kind of the big piece here that you want to be aware of is since that certificate was not added for any of the content files that you're actually trying to publish, you're going to get something that says, signature check failed, binary is untrusted. Now, you can still work through this, but what you need to be aware of is when you come back into your certs, you can see that that certificate for that specific update, it did automatically get added, and we can see that it is a content certificate, meaning that it wasn't the main cert for the catalog, but it's actually one of the EXE or MSI installers for that Adobe update that's being used by a code signing cert. So you can actually come in here and unblock it. And then what would happen is when you went back in here and let's say, okay, I have to go do this again because it's now trusted. When you click publish again, you'll see this kick back up. It might take a minute or two again, but there we go. So now it's downloading again, and it's going to work this time because you did go through and manually unblock it. So, if you did want to go do Flash or Adobe Reader or Adobe Acrobat catalogs, it will work fine. You just won't have the categories for selecting what you want, and you won't have the option to automatically publish with full content, which would be that feature that came out in 2002. So just keep that in mind. If you published a bunch of updates, depending on if the update files were assigned with different certs, you're going to have to kind of be aware that you're going to have to check that log and or check whether there is anything blocked and then unblock it before it will work. Okay. Are you good, Andrew? Do you want to show kind of the expired updates, or is that still syncing?
No, it finished up. Let me go. I'll go ahead and share it back. And here we go. So it does what it says on the box. You see now that all of these updates are declined. Config Manager will go through and actually remove these updates after 7 days automatically. So these updates aren't going to be scanning against endpoints anymore. They're gonna disappear from Config Manager in 7 days, and we're gonna end up scanning against a whole lot less updates on our client side. That's it on this side really. I did have a question on how do I remove all of them. I didn't build that into the script yet, but that's a great idea. So I'll look and see if I can find a way to just get rid of all of the updates for a specific vendor within WSUS. The last thing, of course, that you'd want to do if you don't have WSUS cleanup turned on, first off, go into Config Manager and check out what it does. Go into your sub settings and check out these options. At the very least, you should turn these on. This will help keep your Config Manager lean. I've seen a lot of WSUS environments, and it seems like everyone's WSUS is in a different state of broken. And most of the issues I see is there's just too many updates in there, and it can't be efficient with 10, 20, 30,000 updates in the database. So checking these boxes will help clean up old updates, remove old updates, add indexes to the database so it can scan faster, and remove updates that are obsolete. If you do check this first one, make sure you check your supersedence rules here to make sure you have this length of period to be as long as you want your oldest update to exist in your database. So if you expect to push an update out for more than 3 months, even if it's superseded, make sure you bump this number up. If not, the default is 3 months. With the way Microsoft does updates now, there's not a huge need to keep updates around for more than 3 months. But if you have a need to keep a superseded update around for longer, make sure you bump this up before you enable this option here. But at the very least, if you don't use one of the scripts on the internet to clean your WSUS, at least turn these on. It'll help clean things up. I know they've looked a lot at WSUS on the config manager side and how to improve it, because everyone complains about WSUS. So I do expect in the future for this to be improved more. And then if you want to take action immediately, you can always go into your WSUS, what is it, console, I guess this is called, and run the server cleanup wizard. This will get rid of a bunch of stuff in your database, and again, keep it running clean. Justin just kicked me off again.
Okay, let me I'll show you a cool thing. Here we go. Sorry, you're the only one that could run it on because you have the expired. So let me share that out.
Oh, yes.
So here's kind of the finish up if you want to cover that, Andrew, or is that pretty much it?
No, that's fine. It's going. Hopefully that doesn't mess up what you want to show.
Nope, you're good to go. Now, one thing that I was going to show is kind of a tip. So if you're somebody that does not like these expired updates staying around, like Andrew was saying, like this will happen automatically, and you can probably, let's see, is Control A not working? Yep, so let's say that, Andrew just went through, he cleaned up a bunch of updates. So we could do where expired is equal to yes. Go ahead. And, for those updates, 719, right? So, I mean, that's the number that you had in your tool, right, Andrew, when it prompted and said, hey, you're about to close this many updates.
Yes, so expired 719.
So as long as these updates aren't still in a group, these will be purged out after 7 days of being expired. So this is a built-in task within WSync Manager. That's where you can actually see it being deleted. Now, this does call a stored procedure. So if you're really don't want to wait at all, there's a way to do it where you can run the stored procedure directly. This is basically the value 7 days. That's default. And that's what's in your site control file. So you can actually go change this in WMI to 0, and then it will clean up right away. But one option you can also run is basically this procedure, which is saying, let's run this on demand, which is basically the stored procedure WSync Manager calls in the cleanup. And you can actually run that. And we're saying basically any update that's been expired for 0 days, which is right away, we want to go ahead and clean that up. Just be aware if you do have other updates, like a lot of Microsoft updates, Defender updates, this can take some time, and this can, be IO intense for the database as well, depending on what you have. So, probably best to leave it at that 7 days. But if you're just like, I hate these icons, I need to get them out. We can see that, we had 719. Now we're down to 153. And when that stored procedure is done, they'll basically all be cleaned up from the view in your console. So just a quick tip there. Okay, do you have anything else before the content cleanup for the update services packs, Andrew?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, so let's say that you did publish a lot of updates with full content, and this cleanup would really only be applicable for full content updates. So if you only had a bunch of blue updates, this isn't going to save you any disk space. But what you can do, and you can do this via PowerShell as well, but you would just have to go basically write a script that looks at declined updates, and then it manually calls the WSUS API to delete them. But just to show you how you can do this within a tool that we have, and this doesn't require a license at all. Let's come over here. So it's called the cleanup unreferenced update. So just for a little context, when you actually publish an update to WSUS, you've got your WSUS content folder. This is basically the cab files that when you go and download that update into a config manager deployment package, that's where it gets it from. And this type of content would get cleaned up when you decline the update and run the WSUS cleanup wizard. But there's also this other piece in here called update services packages. So these are basically folders where whenever you publish a third-party update, you're going to have a staging folder where it downloads the binary. So, if this was Dell, HP, Lenovo, these would be their driver files, right? So it's going to have all the content contained within the update, and then it's also going to have the cab file that was used to sign your actual update using your WSUS cert. So pretty much any update file that you have will be duplicated twice. And the issue with this one is it doesn't get deleted by any cleanup. These are just kind of always around. And to show you how you can clean those up, though, you just open the command line real quick. There we go. So there is this WSUS util command that you can run. Okay, so let's just go run that to show you if you just wanted to see how this works. So WSUS util is just it's within WSUS. You can run it from the tools folder. there's this command called list unreferenced packages folders. So let's say that you went through and you declined a bunch of updates and you wanted to basically clean that up. So what you can do before you can actually clean up the unreferenced updates, what you need to run is you basically need to delete those updates from WSUS. And this can also be helpful. Like, for example, say you wanted to get rid of all Dell updates, but you want to do it via UI. You could actually run this tool, no license required for the cleanup, and you could filter by Dell, and then you could basically select all and then choose decline. But what we're going to do, I want to show you how to clean up the unreferenced updates. So what we can do, we can filter by all declined updates. So let's say that you went through, you just turned off 700 updates in our example for Dell drivers. We could then select all those declined updates and then choose delete. So in our case, we can see we have 150 updates within one of our labs here that we want to delete the updates for because they're declined and they're basically never going to be used. And while that's deleting, let me try this from command prompt. Okay, so now that the updates have been deleted, which we can see we didn't have any listed the first time that we ran it, we can run WSUS util, and then we can run list unreferenced update package folders. So this is basically saying, show me any of the update content for those temp files, like where it downloads and signs it, where there's no longer an update that exists at all in WSUS. So this is why you have to delete it first. Otherwise, it's not considered unreferenced, even if it's declined. So now we can see, even running the WSUS command directly, we can see we have those 150 updates that we deleted that were previously declined. So there we go. Now, if you wanted to do this via script, the first part would be to go choose which updates you want to delete based on the status, and then use the WSUS delete API if you didn't want to use the tool. Once you do that, you can then run this command, which will list every single folder that is now unreferenced. Or if you want to do it through one of the tools that we wrote, you can run this utility now, and now it's going to show all those updates that are unreferenced. So for example, most of these are third-party updates from our lab. We can see right here, this folder is a total of 745 meg just by itself. So we can basically, if we wanted to say, okay, we have all our updates, and that matches exactly what we deleted, we've actually got 20 gigs in this folder that, unless you kind of run this cleanup, would never get done. So then if we come back in just to show you the deletion, we can see the total number of updates we had previously published, 845. And then if you use the tool, you can just come in here and delete. And now you can see we're down there. So, if you had never done any type of deletion or cleanup using this method within the WSUS, you could have a massive amount of data, and this could potentially help when you move over to be, more selective within your categories. Outside of that, I think that was most of what we had, right, Andrew? Anything else that you can think of?
We have one more final slide, really. That was it for demo.
Yeah. There we go.
So just in closing, only import the categories that you need. Choose 1 to 5. Just because you saw how when we had about 10 categories, we had 1,000, and dropping that down to 5 or 6, we were able to remove 700. Turn on those WSUS cleanup options in Config Manager. Your WSUS will run a lot smoother and cleaner. Or choose one of the popular scripts. Again, I'll mention Brian Dam again. He has an awesome script for WSUS cleanup that just about everyone recommends. Probably don't do both. Choose one, and try to keep your WSUS clean, because at the end of the day, WSUS performs better the fewer updates it has. WSUS is just reading and processing a database of updates. That's all it does. So the fewer things you have in that database, the faster it's going to run. Your sub scans will be faster, and your client side scanning will be faster. The less stuff you have in there. Clients scan against every single update that you have loaded in WSUS, metadata or full content. And every time they scan, they're scanning through however many number of items you see in that all software updates area. So the more you can clean out, the better. And really, that's it. I think the next slide is just questions.
Yep, let's do that. Let me actually pull Teams up. That might be kind of interesting to kind of see what we're seeing on our view for Q&A. Okay, so a question about the cleanup. Where was that at? Okay, WSUS cleanup. Yeah, so that's Brian's cleanup that he ran. Now, if you're specifically talking about the piece for cleaning up unreferenced updates folders, just because that's not really blogged out that I could find anywhere. Like, we had to do a bunch of research and kind of figure out, like, hey, when you go decline an update, why does that not actually affect the update services packs folder? Even though it cleans up WSUS content, like, you still have all this stuff that you never need in the services packs. So I do have a blog post for that. Let me just try to close this RDP window. I don't know why that's not going away. There we go. Okay, so for that one, I'm including the blog post. So this basically details like what's the content folder, and more specifically the update services packs, because that's probably where, if you have a bunch of content where it's not getting cleaned up, right? So I mean, from there you can go through, and there's actually a video guide in the post where you can specifically see how this tool works. Like, if you were to use our cleanup within our UI, and
we're not
just
seeing
basically
we're not seeing it right now, Justin.
Yeah,
we're just seeing your Teams window.
Yeah, let me pull it back up. There we go. So basically covers that process, and video guide, which is actually very similar to what I just showed you. So yeah, that's documented over there, where you can check out how you can clean up those unreferenced folders. Are you seeing anything, Andrew, that we haven't hit? Management Studio. Okay, so there's the query. So while we're waiting for any new questions that we haven't covered, if you did have the link open for the survey, or even if you don't, if you could open that up. So vsmug.com/feedback will redirect you to a form. And basically pretty simple. How do we do? And probably more interesting, like, what do you want to see next? So you can choose topics, you can put your own topics in. And that's really going to be what we look for feedback. So the sessions that we did today were, co-management, tenant attached, that was all based on that feedback. So please fill that out. And outside of that, I hope you guys enjoyed the session. We'll be hanging around to see what we have. Are you able to manage reports? Is there a user voice? Is there a user voice? Let's do. I'm suspecting that it's probably a user voice for the config manager team that you're talking about there. I don't know. I assume that's probably what that was. I know that we have a user voice for our company to make that automated, which I think we'll probably do. I think we have it marked as planned, but if there's not one to clean up update services packages for like the Microsoft config manager user voice, that would definitely be a good one to get submitted there, because that can save a ton of space. Yeah, okay, so performance issues with drivers, it depends on how many categories, or if they're all enabled. Like, you would probably have to test it out, like run a scan, and then just kind of monitor things like WMI queries that you're seeing on the client side. It can definitely be impactful. There have been a few driver updates where they had supersedence rules that superseded multiple updates to each other, which can cause issues where scanning completely breaks. But that I haven't seen that for a while now. But it can depend on things like client performance. But if you enable them all, it can definitely take quite a while and a pretty decent impact on scanning. Like, if you had if you had all three catalogs enabled with all updates, you're talking maybe 15,000 or more updates that could be scanning from a client side.
Just something I've seen on the client side. Some that I was talking to had the Dell catalog enabled, and it added an extra 15 minutes on the client side for the client to scan against WSUS with all of them, just because of the number of updates. So that's why we really harp on choose only the ones you need.
Oh, this was a good question too. Can I decline updates directly from WSUS console? Not really. And that's not really with regards to third-party updates. So by default, unless you do like some database changes, third-party updates don't actually appear in the WSUS console unless you use a third-party tool. For example, one of the engineers on our team wrote a open source one called WSUS Package Publisher that can read third-party updates, but they don't show up directly in WSUS, and that's just the way that Microsoft did it. You need Config Manager in order to actually expose them. So you would either have to write a PowerShell script that uses the WSUS API to decline the update, or you could use a tool like WSUS Package Publisher, or if you wanted to, you could also use our publisher, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like, and we'll actually go look and show you why you don't see it in WSUS and how you do see it if you're using something like PowerShell to look at the API directly, or if you're using a different tool. So, if we come right here into WSUS, we're not actually going to see any third-party updates because they don't expose third-party products within WSUS directly. So, we don't see any third-party updates here. But if you wanted to clean up and decline third-party, you can use our tool. The option to run our updates wizard does not require a license. So let's say that even if you're using Dell, HP, Lenovo, or really any product, if you wanted to actually see which third-party updates exist, you can come in here and kind of filter by vendor. You can then come in and select which ones you don't want, for example, and then simply click decline. But unless you write a script using PowerShell and then the WSUS API, you're not going to be able to see that directly in the console. Okay. Okay. So yes. So is there reporting dashboards? Actually, this might actually be good to cover just in general. This is also one that does not require any license. Within our tool, you can also install third-party update dashboards. So in the Advanced tab, you can just install the reports. So our site is PR1, our SQL server is SCCM, and then we can start it. So these are actually free regardless of whether you're a customer too. These reports were actually originally done by a support engineer at Microsoft.
I have to do this, but sponsor.
No, it's free. I mind less because it was asking. It's free. This covers how you can install the reports. So just /reports. And then there's also kind of a list of each dashboard and kind of what it does. But originally, these are an example post, and we did some stuff like building a installer for it, and as well as changing the URLs that you put in our tool when you run the prompt. And here's the original post from it, just to give credit. These are some really cool updates that cover the dashboards. But if you want to install it kind of automated, you can run that, and then that will basically tie into Config Manager, where you're going to get additional dashboards right in your reporting folder, and that will show you third-party or Microsoft updates as well. ADR deployment package. Okay, yeah, you've already covered that one. Yep, covered that. Got the doc. Looks good. Okay. I think we've got everything. Anything else that you see, Andrew?
Nope. I think we can close. Only like half an hour late?
Yep. No, we were scheduled for 15 after. Not too bad.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Okay, well, just want to thank everybody for joining again. Please fill out the survey. If you do want to get notified about future events, you do have the option right on the VSMUG website where you can subscribe, and that will basically email you whenever there's a new event. Usually, I think we're going to be shooting for the future every 3 to 4 months. If you do want to submit a session, please feel free to go submit that as well. But outside of that, I just want to thank everybody for joining, and I hope you enjoyed the session.
And thank you to our presenters.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure. Pleasure.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so there is one question here. I guess I'll cover a couple of these that just came in. So you're running an ADR, and you're saying that Adobe updates are not showing up. So what that basically means is the updates are probably only metadata only. So that means they're blue. So metadata only updates do not actually have the content file, meaning that you can't actually deploy them until you go and publish them. So you either need to right click those updates or you need to use the content staging option. But if you do have a metadata only update, and I don't mind running over. If anyone wants to jump, feel free to jump off. But just to show this, which lab were you on again, Andrew, with the metadata only updates, or do we have?
That was demo 1, 2.
We have a lot of labs. Sometimes
The naming scheme.
Okay, let's see what we have here. Actually, I think these are probably all full content, or most.
No, there's some because some of them failed.
Where's that Adobe one that we had? Is that demo?
I don't remember.
Demo 3.2. Okay, we've got it. Okay, so we have all these Adobe updates, right? So this is probably the same exact scenario that you're running into, right? So I mean, if we come look at here, we have a bunch of these updates showing up, right? But they're all blue, meaning they're only metadata. And let me just run another sync because I think we did publish this one. So if you were to go back into an ADR and say, actually, wait, this one will probably be faster. So let's just say we wanted to include vendor Adobe. And if we click preview, like we only have the one update, right? But we don't have all those updates. And the reason for that is if I go refresh, I can see that one that, if you remember, I right clicked and chose publish content. That means it actually went and downloaded the update binary. And in order to actually deploy updates, you do need to have it published with full content. So that's why all of these blue ones aren't showing up. And if you do want to get more info on that, within the PowerPoint, there is that section about metadata only updates and what are they. That one specifically describes this scenario where you only have your blue metadata icons, and that means that basically you can't deploy them until you go publish. So some more details there, but basically you're going to have to get the content published in order for your ADR to be able to pick that up. So if you go to the V3 catalog, you can enable that content staging option, and that will make sure that anything that meets the criteria for a product that you enable will automatically publish with full content so that you could fully automate ADRs in the future. Awesome. Okay, don't see anything new. So thanks everybody, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it off now.